Welcome to See Films. In this video, we will dive into the movie Avatar: The Last Airbender. We will discuss movie storylines and its ending. We will also talk about movie cast and characters. Moreover, we will discuss movie reviews and its box office. Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 review. Netflix live action remark still has not found its fate. Netflix live action Avatar: The Last Airbender continues to be a despairingly pointless adaptation, still misunderstanding the appeal of the original Nickelodeon cartoon. As with season 1, the chef problem is pacing aimed at a middle school audience. Although it attracted plenty of adult viewers, the animated series was fast-paced and funny, airing long season of 20-minute episodes that gradually introduce a rich fantasy world. The Netflix remarks confidence into this structure more suited to the adult TV with season 2, clocking it at 7 plot-heavy hurling episode. That is not to say this version is more mature. However, it's just slower and more serious in tone. Two traits that definitely are not beneficial to the source material. After mastering the art of the water bending with the help of water tribe sibling Katara, Kiawentiio and the Sokka, the 12-year-old Avatar Aang, Guardian Cormier spent this session exploring the Earth Kingdom. In order to master or for spiritual element and bring peace to the world, the most find and the earthbending teacher as soon as possible. This teacher comes into the unexpected form of a blind girl named Toph, a lively and the desperate adaptation to the cast. But the next chapter of Aang's education bring a new set of the dangers as Fire Nation forces spread through the Earth Kingdom and prepare to attack the walled city of the Ba Sing Sea. Things get considerably darker this season. Aang and his friend encounter refugees fleeing from the Fire Nation attacks and the navigative a complicated political situation within a Ba Sing Sea, cutting out most of the territorial storyline this season adapts a memorable arc from the original series. The period our heroes spent as guests in the Ba Sing Sea, trapped by the authoritarian government that the release on the propaganda, surveillance, and the terrifying the cadre of the secret police. At the same time, the Fire Lord's son Zuko and the Zuko's lovable uncle Arrows and have also made their way to Ba Sing Se, living under assumed name as they both grappled with their roles in the war. Here we see our first hints of the repetition arc for the Zuko, who was previously hell-bent on capturing Aang for the Fire Nation war effort and now trying to build a new life as a civilization. Zuko is an aghast teenager who desperately wants to prove himself to his child-hearted father but cannot measure to up his rudderless sister Azula. Despite focusing on some of the most compelling storylines for the Nickelodeon show, this season suffered from exactly the same problem we saw in season 1. Instead of bright color and quick humor you had hoped to see in a kids show, it's full of long, slow-paced dialogue scenes with nary a joke in the side. Frequently filmed in the dark, the short net episode count also means less time for casual character development. Miyoko makes her mark as the rude and the cynical, topped by most of the ensemble cast trail feel pretty thickly characterized that include Aang himself, because while Guardian Cormier does his best embody Aang's naive charm, he is the hamstring by the show's relative lack of the comedy, a problem that may stem from the makeup of the creative team. Unlike better original creators who specialize in the children animation, all of the remarks writer come from an adult TV background, previously working on shows like Castle, The Ring of Power and The Supergirl. Considering the way these remarks struggle with humor and pacing, I think it would have benefited from the look for more towards Disney Channel's stomach and ways writers have a better understanding of children's entertainment. You could gripe about a dozen fundamental problems with Netflix Last Airbender, but they ultimately fade into the same issue. It's boring to watch. One particularly illustrative example arrives in the season premiere when Aang asks his old friend Bommy to teach him to earthbend and the Bommy refuses, explaining why Aang should seek out a different teacher in the cartoon. This is an action-packed chase sequences full of intensive fantasy combat culminating in about the 45 seconds of the exposition. On Netflix, it becomes a 3-minute static conversation taking place in the darknet room. No one enjoys having things explained to them in this manner, least of all 10 years old. Mr. Knight and Shyamalan's Avatar movie is now a defining example of disastrous live-action adaptation, in large part due to the way it featured a majority white cast in the Asian fantasy setting. The Netflix show cleared the bar by the staying true to the source's material and making the authentic casting choices. It does have a purpose beyond capitalization on the popular franchise. Plus, the live-action format arrived with its own challenges. Avatar: The Last Airbender animated geography and the drew inspiration from the real material arts. But for obvious reason, a lot of the bending techniques break the laws of physics. In order to make that work in live action, you had need a material arts stunt and team that is show simply does not have. Also read Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender remarks is rewriting the story in the Fire Nation favor. For viewers who are new, the story season 2 provide a deeper look at the Fire Nation war, which we witness through its impact on the civilian life across the Earth Kingdom. Refugees and the traveling to find food and shelter, while older generations recall their previous experiences with the Fire Nation attacks. In Ba Sing Sa, we get a kid-friendly exploration of life under an oppressive regime with where government erases all audience and the worst outside. Seeming a little younger than the Hunger Game, it's a dystopian narrative that viewers can easily mop into the real life, depicting how well-meaning people can be shared by the propaganda and the manipulative leadership. Once again, Zuko receives the most interesting arc among the main cast, starting to forge in their own identity as he faces through the destructive effect on his father's rule. But at the risk of belaboring the point, this season quality still pale in the comparison to the original series, starting a young cast who sometimes struggle to bring life to a dull script. This shows man's selling point in the film, and that is not the cartoon, and that clear is not a stunt in the life. Premieres Thursday, June 25 on the Netflix. Who isn't Gordon Cormier, Dollars Leo Kiawentiio, Lan Osili, Paul's son, Hang Lee Mayoko, who is Bandit, Christian Boylan, and the Jabbar Reziners, Bert Kim. For fans of season 1 of Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender, episode was 5 to 7. Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 Review. The gang's Earth Kingdom journey starts rough but stays resolute. Netflix live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender is truly unlike that fans have seen more the original series. Although it retains the same theme of the Nickelodeon show, its many narrative change left some fans in a spin. Certain stories were removed or pulled forward, whether that be early introduction of the Azula and her friends or the condensing of the gang's ventures in the Omashu. And however, because the Avatar: The Last Airbender changed certain element, its story felt the somewhat original season 2 further pushes that the boundary of the originality with the addition of more element only person later in the animated series. Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 sees the Aang, Gordon, Cormier, Katara, and the Sokka making their way to the Earth Kingdom. Although Aang is forced on the learning how to earthbend, he does not have a teacher who handicapped him. Unfortunately, the gang find an unlikely master who knows much more about the earth, ending with they do. Toph, their journey with the Toph leads them to Ba Sing Se, the mysterious Earth Kingdom city that is much more secretive than it seems. Stuck in the city while still on the run from the Fire Lord's forces, the gang must overcome their greatest features to the survive. Although it took some time for the season 1 to find its footing, season 2 feels a lot more narratively cohesive. Albeit it still remove and then insert certain storylines together. Given how the first 2 episodes focused on the serpent's past storyline, I had some the hesitance about how it created the necessary emotional drive. However, the writing team managed to utilize the story in a way that shows how struggle it in the building Aang and the Katara bond, while still returning the carefully flow. Although the animated series made this story feel much grander in terms of stakes and continuity, Netflix more focused like allows Kangas and feel much more special. Plus, there are some the needed downtime and movement between two that happily provide the lightheartedness in the midst of the thing. The insertion of Book 3 element with the water the last Airbender season 2 was also quite a surprise given how these elements were utilized back then theme and appearing here meant that some of the necessary narrative steps would need to be shifted. Sure, there is initial reasoning and the motivation given to such a character in the first two episodes. It looked like time of the gaps why those things needed to come there should have those motivations were only the foundational. However, once things that those characters fell into the place, it did start to make sense. But does take away other things. I do have to see fans of both show might already know about the which character I am talking about, but for new fans, it definitely make you curses and about these details were introduced here. The said awaited the last Airbender season 2 quickly throws Toph in the fold in episode 2, which help us quickly get the acquainted with her. Simply, but Miyoko's casting Toph is truly one of the best live action casting since easily adapts to Toph and confident and steady minism as well as her emotional complexities. The newfound chemistry with her Casime's feels nations as feels like the character dynamics from the original series carried over without any hitches. Top training moment with the Wang are joy to watch, especially when they are both on the road together, similar to the episode Bitter Work. There are 7-1 sequences where Aang's been thrown on much training advice by the different voices that plays up the shortness and the perfectly. However, it is the character-centered movements of are with her family that allows that idea of driving expectations that make her complain. Toph's self's journey does it some familiar beats to the animated series, like the unraveling of her family more secretive dealings but somewhat rushes through the climax of that development. Fans of the animated series understand the necessary steps that the Toph took to end in this situation, but it certainly felt like the climax could have been stretched out just a bit more. The other character in the season 2 that gets a lot of the development in Zuko. At this point, the Zuko been hiding with Auro from his sister Azula, leading of his gradual redemption arc. Although the animated series split Zuko and Auro apart, the live action adaptation takes a more sympathetic perspective of Zuko activities. Much of the Zuko's time is actually spent with him trying to help him with family need, staying with them in the reflect his fire nation. The princehood Loy's performance as a Zuko explications these the colder movement because of new Zuko's wants to ride, but it is still conflicted by the innate desire for the domination and approval. However, it's when Zuko takes up the specific mantle that puts a spotlight on that the pathetic trait he has. Opposites and the Azula finds herself in that same emotional boat with the only difference because that she has been manipulated by her father. Azula is the cunning and the threatening as well ever be, but there is shade of that shows need to be beloved. This especially shows on episode 1 to 4 and the 6 which bring the tendency of the Azula despite the debate of her friends Mai and the Lee. In fact, the time spent on his carefully featuring bond between the own self and Doris shows that the Azula is not one phase on ghost we knew her for the season 1. In fact, there are some flashback to the Zuko and Azula childhood that always make you feel sympathetic for the family, but these are the brief as well. All said and none are the narrative flow of the water. The Last Airbender season 2 is more thematically choice-safe, even though it jumps to the endgame story quickly. Episode 5 feels proof of this as those and the mean to be reflective experience for the gang. A change might feel slightly rushes. That said, the other visual element carry over the quite well with the particular improvement with the banding effect and action sequences. The blend of the effect and the stunt work are carefully edited to make those attacks, especially Azula, feel heavy. Even the smaller, funnier movement that the energy and the liveliness to get a good rough or two, as seen with the Aang and the Toph. Avatar: The Last Airbender season 2 shows the good improvement, particularly due to newcomer Miyoko, who wonderfully rounds out this in Sable and the season 2 thematically storytelling feels more choice and its hitting element action pack and why more of a punch, giving old and new fans apple amplify time to the reach not with the gang in their next venture. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 Rotten Tomatoes score debuted with the franchise record after 18 years. Avatar The Last Airbender is still bending expectations as Season 2 of the Netflix live-action adaptation has debuted with the franchise record on the Rotten Tomatoes after 18 years. Based on the animated Nickelodeon series of the same name that aired for 3 seasons from 2005 to 2008, Netflix live-action adaptation premiered in the February 2024 to slightly mixed reviews from the critics. However, that did not stop it from being renewed for both the second and the third season the following March, with the third season set to calculate the series. Now, on the day of its release on June 25, Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 has debuted with a 71% score from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, the highest since the original series, which earned perfect 100% score across all 3 seasons, with Season 1 of Netflix live adaptation of 62% and the 2010 film an infamous 5%. Season of 2 Netflix live adaptation only has 14 reviews at the time of the writing, so its score should the fluctuate as more the published. It also has a 65% audience score with a favor that 50% rating. See how it is compared past scores below. Developed by the Albert Kent, Netflix live-action Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 continues following the Aang, Katara and Sokka as the journey deep into the Earth Kingdom territory in the search of an earthbending master and a guide to warn the world about an incoming comet. The come include Gordon Cormier as Aang, Kiawentiio and Katara, Aang and the Azula as Sokka, Dolores Liu as a Prince Zuko, Parson Heng Lee's Uncle Arro, Daniel J. Kim as a Fire Lord Ozai, and Elizabeth Yaw as Princess Azula. Now, additions to the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 cast include the Miyoko as a Toph Beifong and alongside Raka Sharma, Deacon Lachman, Jeremy O. Crystal Yu and Hoy Alexander, Justin Chen, Jin Hung and the Anita Zoe, Lourdes Fabrius and the Kelsey Loves in the recurring roles. In the Screen Rant's review of the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2, Lewis Glassberg related it 7 of to 10 stars and says still it is not beloved original but solid change expert production and a strong spirit mean it does not need to be and continues. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 does not transact and the original show and never will be. It the remains well made, mostly well acted and the infectious enjoyable. Overall reviewing suggests that season of 2 Netflix live action adaptation improves on its first season with the stronger action, darker themes and richer visual. Many also the praise the performances, emotional stakes and the expanded conflict throughout the Four Nations storyline. However, some critics complained that Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 released too heavily on the nostalgia, feels like the expensive cosplay at times piles on the many Antigosians and the struggle to fully comment on the bold adaptation. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 RT audience score debuts to negative record. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 is not bending score to the right side. Avatar The Last Airbender is one of the biggest animated series of all time. Due to that, there are a lot of eyes on how Netflix live action version of the story changed what original did. Over the years, live action remakes of anime and the animated series have more often than not Netflix and left something to be the desired given the structure of the project it is adapting. The Netflix fantasy series has to fire on the cylinders at all time, otherwise it risks sparking heavy criticisms. While it seems like the Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 did not quite the stick landing. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 audiences score on the Rotten Tomatoes such has been revealed and with the returning Netflix series standing at the decent 65% at the time of writing. While that might not be see all the negative at the face value, the score becomes a problem when compared to the rest of the iconic fantasy franchise. At 67%, the next season of the live action and Netflix series carries the world audience score to date when talking in the account season 1 and all three seasons of the original animated series. It overtakes season 1 Rotten Tomatoes audience score to behold that the negative record. Netflix Water The Last Airbender season 1 hold a slightly higher 70% audience score. Both seasons of the live action fantasy series have performed the decently, just not on the same level as the original animated series, the beloved show, and the three near perfect seasons in a row. The animated Water The Last Airbender season 1 boost a stellar 97% audience score, with the season 2 at an even better 99% and the season 3 at an equal 99%. As can be seen, the general audience's consequence on the live action series is that a decent show, not necessarily bad, but the original is a masterpiece. The new season of the Netflix series has also landed lower than the three seasons of the original animated Water The Last Airbender. In terms of its critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, the cartoon boasts a pitch perfect 100% critic score for all three of its seasons, which is quite a rare feat. While Water The Last Airbender season 2 might have failed to match the animated series in the both score, it did mark a step for the show where the critics are concerned. Season 2's current 71% critic score, which could still fluctuate, beats season 1 62%. In Screen Trend Water The Last Airbender season 2 review, Lewis Glasborg gave the fantasy series at 7 out of 10 score. According to the writer, the show's cast remains a mixed bag, with the actor like Aang star Gordon Cormier and the Katara actress Kiawentiio being understudied by the Netflix script. Glasborg praised Miyoko debut to Toph, claiming she is the perfect translating from the animation to live action. Water The Last Airbender season 3, which has already been filmed, will serve the final season of the Netflix series, bringing the story that originated in the animated show to the end. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 26 biggest Easter egg and hidden references. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 is chock full of the Easter egg, from those that the references the original show, the wider joke lines and teases the ending of the Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2. Saw and the gravely injured by the Azula as the Fire Nation took control of the Earth Kingdom capital by Sing Si, and the story before that showcased the Avatar and his friends trying to wear the Earth King for the Fire Nation imminent danger while searching for a way to fight back. This mostly adaptation season 2 of the original show, but naturally there were some change made by the Netflix. But in the end of the contents and the 20 episode into 7 into Netflix The Last Airbender, or just a general alternation that come with the adaptation one medium into the another. This meant that the same thing from the original series were left out, and however this is the same Netflix live action version did not reference this skipped element. In fact, many of the Easter egg in the Netflix Water The Last Airbender Season 2 are exactly this two element from the animated show. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 3 will likely continue this arguable on an even bigger scale than Season 2 did. For now, though, it is worth recalling all of the way Netflix second season nod to the wider Water The Last Airbender universe. Of course, it would be nearly impossible to outline every single reference across all 7 episodes, but there are the biggest, most obvious or the funniest Easter egg found in the season 2 of Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender. 26. The Secret Tunnel Singer. One of the bigger changes to the animated show that impact both seasons of Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender was the change to the cave of two lovers. Still, season 1 the reference the episode via the inclusion of the Secret Tunnel song. In season 2, another Easter egg to the event of the original episode is included, with the happier liked singer traveling through the Serpent's Pass with Aang, Katara and Sokka, which like the Secret Tunnel singer from the cave of two lovers. 25. Diverters Love. Later in the first episode of the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender, Aang and Katara have a conversation by the campfire. Aang considers telling Katara that he views her more than a friend. With a familiar tone can be heard in the musical score. That tone is Avatar Love, the theme for the Katara and Aang relationship, originally composed by Jeremy Zuckman for the animated show. 24. Low and Lee. Two characters that appeared throughout the original show were Lo and Lee twin, and ladies were served as advice to Azula in one scene in the water The Last Airbender Season 2 on Netflix. These characters appear in a similar capacity, however, given that do not appear again, that briefly Como can be classed on the Easter egg to the original show rather than a sign that will be regular cast member. 23. Drill trunks and war balloons. The scene in which Loli and the bear take place during a war meeting with the Fire Lord, with the Azula discussing how they can the conquer by Singsi, one of the Azula attackers in the scare the Earth Kingdom and the draw him to the certain point of the wall using the drill tanks and the wild balloons where the captive earthbender and the beneath of the foundation, and the references to the artillery in Easter egg to the several aspects of the original show that were left out of Netflix show. 22. Skadi Omasho stories about Azula. Another is egg concerning Azula and the missing original episode in Netflix Water The Last Airbender links to the invasion of the Omash, the animated show, dedicated an entire episode to the finding Bami in Omasho, with Azula Mai and the T. Lee being probably introduced. Antagonia's Netflix adaptation shortened this distally and through Sokka line that many of the Omasho have the Scottish stories about the Azula is a reference to the original storyline. 21. Zuko and the baby. During the Zuko travel in the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender, he steals the supplies from a pregnant couple before the later returning to the belongings. This itself is reference to the original show in which Zuko considered doing the same. 20. Water Tribe. One of the more directed Easter of the original show in the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender comes as Katara finds out about the Earth Rumble VI, and after phrasing to Root Man in the law using the water bearing, and Sokka walks past and coolly explains Water Tribe. This exact scene happens in the original show, with the Netflix version paying homage to that. 19. Azula Apps 4. Another episode from the original show that is changed quite significantly in the next letter was the Last Airbender Season 2 is the chase. The original episode involved Azula chasing Team Avatar in the mechanical tank with the Aang attempting through her off their secret and the using a passport at the point. Also, the story does not happen exactly like this in a Netflix version. That scene still include Azula noticing Appa's for following the different trail. 18. Aang's face in the soap. Yet another direct translation of an original joke in the Netflix Water The Last Airbender comes the courtesy of the Toph during dinner with Toph parents. She attempts to stop the Aang from the blowing to her cover the blind bandit. 17. Zoko's impeccable strong bulletin. During a conversation with the Zoko mother, Ursa is a flashback fired Lozo and the Ozir drop a hidden reference to the future episode of The Water The Last Airbender in the original show's third season. An episode titled The Water and the Fire Lord reverse the Roko and Onga predecessor used to the best friend with Fire Lord Seasosn, and the last the home started the 100-year war that Ong fights with the that make reveal all the more important leads to Zoko. 16. Zoko's honor. The confrontation between the Zoko, Azula, and the Aang and the end of the Water The Last Airbender Season 2 episode 2 includes a very meta Easter egg in the wider fan base. Azula referenced the original show by making Zoko's quest to the capture the water world will capture the water and restore my honor. After throwing the Zoko angrily states, I never said that for a while. That line about the reasoning his honor being associated with Zoko in the water fan base and what Netflix show the reference claims to the never actually said such a line. 15. Toph blinders. The original Water The Last Airbender uses Toph blinders as a source of many jokes, with the Netflix live action version paying homage to that. Several jokes are repeat, some of that the reference to the other scenes from the original. 14. Cactus Juice. The desert in the another fan favorite episode from the original Avatar The Last Airbender that is not the part of the Netflix version, though that did not stop the later from the snaking in a few Easter eggs that the reference it. The most prevalent was the inclusion of the cactus juice, a drink used by the high-class Earth Kingdom citizen to part as officer to the literary juice of a desert cactus. 13. The Taste of a Ba Sing Se. The Taste of the Ba Sing Se was an anthology episode of the original animated Water The Last Airbender that linked several short stories of the character live in the tutorial city. 12 nicknames. Like many of the jokes from the original series being refused in the Netflix water The Last Airbender to see the several nicknames. Azula nickname for Zoko Zozui is mentioned in the earliest scene during which with the contrast with the brother and the Aang. 11. There is no war in the Ba Sing Se. One of the more obvious Easter to the original show was the race in the trailer for the Netflix water The Last Airbender. During the trailer and season 2 episode 3 Joe D is shown the saying there is a war in Ba Sing Se. This has become somewhat of a Mandela effect with the water fandom using the quote to refer to the original series despite Joe D never really actually saying the line in the animation. 10. Spark Rock and Cold Tea. A fight scene that left absent in the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender is the one between the Jet and Zuko is Ba Sing Se. In the original show, the farmer finds out the leader and the arrow and the firebenders, letting him try to catch them out of the proof. 9. The Cabbage Man. Perhaps the most expected Easter egg in the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender is one of the famous Cabbage Man. Gambling D and the wild Netflix water The Last Airbender includes a lots of the reference to episodes from the season of 2 the original show that were not adapted, also the snap one in the season 3 episode they may not be depicted either. And after Sokka follows Toph to the poetry class, she tells about her parents' contract with the Fire Nation. Sokka states that was initially worried she was hiding gambling debut in the group referencing the original show season 3 episode 7 the runway in which Toph becomes the addicted to the gambling scam. Number 7. Avatar 1 The Lion Turtles. During season 2, episode 5 of the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender, the crew visit the spirit library of Wan Shi Tong. At one point, Aang and Toph are shown looking through and the water avatars section of the library with the farmer viewing a scorer of the character bending all of 4 elements in front of Lion Turtle. Avatar The Last Airbender bosses on cutting, sandbanding, the drill episode and other season 2 changes. There's only so much we can fit. Netflix live-action Avatar The Last Airbender is back for season 2, following Aang's and Cormier journey to learn earthbending for the young blind mentor Toph Beifong, and just in the second season of the original Nickelodeon show. Like the first series, Aang, Katara and the Sokka travel to the wild city of the Sea Sea to find an earthbending teacher. They are purchased and the Azula and princess of the Fire Nation and her friends Mai and Lily, and the meanwhile exiled Princess Zuko and his uncle Iroh are on the run and try to blend into the quieter life of the Earth Kingdom. While there is Aang and his friends discover a massive conspiracy within Ba Sing Se and government that ignores that war going on the outside the city walls. They also learn some critical intel and from the discovering the desert labyrinth of Wan Shi Tong that could defeat the Fire Nation once and for the all. The upcoming solar eclipse and will prevent all the freeband and the weekend their hated enemies as they escape the library. Aang's sky vision Appa is stolen and which nearly tears the friend group apart. In the end, Aang's crew recovers Appa and finds the missing Earth King who is unaware of his government's cover-up of the war. However, Azula interrupts the group and the duos Aang and the Katara with Zuko who nearly had change of heart. After opening up to Katara in the climatic ending, Azula wears lighting and strikes Aang in the chest. When incapacitated him while he is the water state, Katara, Toph and the Sokka escape with Aang and the Earth King, and the Katara is able to heal the Aang of his nearly fatal wound. They fly away from the Ba Sing Se aboard Appa as the Aang forces the long load of the recover and must still learn how to friends. And speaking with the variety showrunner Christmas Biolan and the executive producer Jabbar Razani discussed the change they made from the Nickelodeon shows such as cutting and blending, adding in the Katara painted lady arc from the season 3 and cutting the action-packed Nickelodeon season 2 episode The Drill. I want to start with the season premiere which takes the Serpent's Pass episode from the midway through the original series and kicks off his new season, and how you decide to make that episode one of season 2. Christine Violin for the writing discussion. I got everybody in the room on the first day and we knew we wanted to deal with the refugee story on some level. It's a huge thematic part of the animated series. Everyone in the writer's room on the crew is a huge fan. I try to remind everybody that we are going to an adaptation of the myth and a legend. That means it is not exactly the same and it's never going to be one to one. We started to look at the scenes and the story that are maybe not done as in the depth in the animation that we could accomplish here and get more emotional, get into the action in a way that maybe an animator cannot, and what are some stories that are better done in animation that we would not want to teach because they are perfect as it. We started out by talking about the real life refugee stuff like the people's families and the blog story, and I said to writer, if you feel the comfortable, tell you about your parents, grandparents, nesters when they want and from place to place, why they did, how they did, who helped them, what was the hardship and what was the joy in these situations. We get amazing family stories and we looked all three seasons and started putting things on the board. We kept season 3 in mind, even though we did not know if we were going to get the shoots season 2. We definitely did not think we are going to shoot season 3, yet we kept all the three in mind no matter what, and we looked at the character arc and their growth. Growth is not the straight line. You go up, down, backwards, forward again. You learn in the fate and the stars, especially if you are young. How can we make this growth arc as interesting and surprising as the possible? Even the people who know the show. Jabbar Razani, the story that we wanted to tell was the pretty clear from the season scripts, but at a certain point there is also a little bit of push and pull with the production because we want to physically build so many build x number of sets before you are gonna not be able to build anymore, so part of it come before and down to like the drill tags. Viola RIP, they existed. Rasani, we really wanted to do it. The plan is still presented in the world, but that is one of those things where at the end of the day it came down to we just cannot fit this in. It was in until really late stage and then we finally had to lift two out. Viola, that's an amazing creative exercise. We took a whole episode about the drill and the way that did it was a little bit different and the boiler did done to this pitch and the Zulu gives. I said to Elizabeth, this is whole episode you are pitching a really strategy. Azula never pitches anything that is not absolutely executable. We know because we executed so that we great for her. She had all of that to draw on. Rezani, we try to do that anytime that we lose something. We try as much as we can do just notes to animated stories so fans know wanted to in there too. We are not just taking things out like, oh, we don't know they need things, and at the certain point there is only so much that we can fit. The drill episode was another arc I noticed was missing from the original. Now that did the episode look like before you cut it? Boyland, you want to know the secret about the kill your drilling? It's the cannibalize your darling, and when someone comes up with a cool bit in the episode and you are not going to do the episode anymore, you take that cool bit and you put it somewhere deep in the season 3. So there is lot of stuff that we put into the episode that starts with Elizabeth's speech and whole bunch of the stuff with Azula, May and the Tilly, that the friendship is very important to all of us. Female friendship on the screen is very important, whether you are horrors or the violence. A lot of the friendship stuff we pulled out of that episode and put into the other episode. We may have lost their bit, but the episode length got longer, so we managed to kind of cannibalize add the bit we love most. I think the only thing that gone is the actual drill. Everything else is still there, whether is landed in season 2 or the season 3. We find our favorite bits, jokes, all that the stuff and put everything we could. The Painted Lady was another arc from the original show's third season that you moved into the season 2. Why did you give Katara that storyline now? While and one of the first thing I pitched was really location, really state, and let's get into the world. I definitely want to do Fire Nation succession story, and the painted lady makes much more season in the season 2 because Katara is kind of done the teaching on. So what Katara doing? It was really important to me. One of her major drives in this need for justice. It's something that I relate to really personality, and a lot of the writers did as well. We thought let's do this kind of like a movie that some of them had never seen before. The Batman returns. There is people in this city that need her help. We are not going to be traveling as much as animated series can travel, so let's show the disparity between the lower middle and the upper ranks. She is going to notice who is not getting taken care of before the anybody else notice that she is used to doing stuff right out in the open. So far her to even try and hide herself. I am really into the shadow stories. Shadow are not necessarily a negative part of our ourselves. A shadow is just any other part of the ourselves that maybe we are not ready to show other people yet. And shadow integration stories. Zoko has the story with the blue spirit. Aang has that story. He is Aang as an enormous, and he is also director. He has the integrate all of these part of himself over 3 seasons, so each of them gets sort of a mini arc. Toph has to integrate Viking and being a Beifong with the being is rough, tough earthbender who is a blender bended everyone's, and the shadow side it is just the Katara is a little more award, and because she gets to put on the makeup and dress up, so let's put it here where she can do the most good, and she did not have a natural arc, so we played that arc and wove it with the everybody else. Rosani, when you have to do the season at the season same time, one of the benefit is you can see it can slot into the season 2 and the space that maker for the season 3 because we knew where the season 3 was going to go, and that allowed more space in the season 2. Boyle and Katara got a big arc in the season 3. There is not the sand bending or the smash bending in the season either, where ever a point you were going to show these other forms of the bending. Rosani, a part of it come down that we can fit in the season, and the just hard to make the certain choices when we look at the something and like the set bending. There is probably some opportunities we could have the integrated into the story, but then we have a whole other kind of the binding we have to the R&D and executed it start to open up the spend down this path. If we are trying to tell the most distilled versions of the story that we can afford and which we wanted to be really powerful, we have to the concentrate on these stories that are really at the heart and core of the overall story we are going to tell. While and it comes back to the cannibalizing a thought, because once we figured out we could note that we went back to the character of the beast thing. See, how does this inform the character of the city? These are all the earthbender. They expand the walls of the city as people join the city, and the ring need to get bigger. They have taken over the land around it. Who is to say what was there before beast thing? See, expanded. We look to history a lot on these show. I like to think of it as a historical fantasy. We looked at the history and how cities would expand and make their walls higher. So not being able to do sandbending made that could tell more of the story of the beast and make it more for a character. If the CGI and the special effect had not shot the budget up with, would you have to put in the show? Violent part of the creative is you to try to fit what you are. You have go to matter what, and then the game you play without yourself is how can we be creative as possible within those boundaries. Resani, if you asked would you do 1 or 2 more episodes, ye definitely to tell a little bit more story. Let's do some of the things that we could not fit in the head and hard time cutting. We hated cutting stuff like a Bosco. There is this thing is painting of Bosco, and we had a long series of the joke, and at the end of the day we are like, we cannot even put in the joke the painting is greater because fans know that we are fan and we wanted to have the concession and hang to this painting for too long. It's a nice note to the folk that they feel passionate about this moment. It's hard unless you can do it all and do it right. It's worried to the middle ground. We even did it is a play pubs and beer. It in this beer it was too much to not have the actual beer, and you needed to Basco to that the whole run. While and Basco was in there for long a time, there are a lot of creatures that are not on the cutting room floor, a lot of the joke runs, a lot of serious stuff. We try to keep the right balance. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 reviewed. Netflix can bend its way out this one. In 2024, Netflix released the second live-action adaptation of the critically acclaimed children animated series Avatar The Last Airbender. Though no, the Witcher, like the M. Night Shyamalan's film version of the story, the Netflix series was not perfect and generally failed to capture what made the original show so unique and charming. Now, in its second season, the live action series has made some much needed improvement, but it is still held back by the burden of the condensing book to sprawling animated narrative into the 7 roughly hour long episode and by visible and the hanging of its youngest cast members. So, more it still massively misunderstands some cruel character that the motives and the necessity of the certain story arc. But there is one thing that might make these challenge forgivable, and that's the introduction of the Toph Beifong and Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 found its footing a little more. The second season picks up after the water Aang, Gordon Cormier and his pals saved the Northern Water Tribe from a Fire Nation attack and are now looking for an earthbending teacher. An unspecified amount of time has passed, but it's been long enough, and the Aang has showed up like a bumbo spot, and the Soki puts it. His sudden were immature as a little disrating, and the visual lesson the weight of the knowing as a children has to save the world, but the Cormier make up for by its telling more of Aang's groovier side his season, and overall has polished his acting. Joining him as usual in Sokka and the Katara, both of whom benefit from the immensely refined writing in the season 2. Sokka embraces his comic relief side that was missing from a season 1, and the Oisley nails the iconic joke brought over from the original series. Katara take up a leadership role. It's done naturally because of her desire to keep things in order, and she is often given to the other choice when Aang get overall emotional. They find an earthbending teacher in Toph and blind girl who comes from the wealthy Beifong family. Gag particularly and Pearl's tough straight from the animation. She is funny and the fierce, but also a balanced, psychologically fragile and side that her character who hate to admit the process out of every character adapted on the screen. Toph is the most like her original counterpart, and the what better is that the inclusion of Toph finally makes the Aang front and group feel like a more family rather just who sibling on an adventure with a random kid. Together, all of the travel the great city of the Ba Sing Se into the informed king and of the Seasosn comet, and even that we enhance the firebender's abilities and make Fire Lord Ozzy and unspotable. Also in the city, they are the trouble Zoko and his wise uncle Oro on the return from the nation and being hunted down by the Zoko's beneful sister Azula. Season 2 still struggles with the weight of the real narrative. As one might expect, there is lot of happening in Season 2 that is given with the Zulu and her friends, Mai and Tilly, Momona, Tamata, and the taking up much larger roles with the additional supporting character like Jin, Hans, Longfang, and the Netflix series is also still sticking to the choice, and Moiko is more present in the story in the original series. He has hardly seen until Season 3, which does not exactly work. Let's just say not every villain needs the redeeming qualities. Structurally, the plot struggles are member of the storylines, and the setting from the animated series are cut out and the condensed into the singer's setting by Singh Saab with a few additional exterior space. The takeaways takes away a lot of the magic of the story meant to capture how big and the beautiful the Earth Kingdom is. As the alternative, the short asks for the recognition with new title card that are truthfully one of the best part of the series thus far, and that's more the showrunner Christine Biolan and the Jabbar Zani tend to the reference storyline or beats that could have been at almost like that the treat series as banned and the basically poking fun at something that happened in the original series, not follow through with it and the Netflix. It's a darling thing to do a story that gets so much right in the first place, but they are also miss the point entirely by combining so much storyline into one, like Azula going after her brother. He's ventilated that hidden library and Appa being lost. There is a narrative thread and themes that flow together, allowing the curricular character development to the occur and emotional moment to pay off. The Netflix series overlooks all of that, but to look on the positive side, that series is more enlightened about it. The sensitive themes of the genocide, war, and the imagination this season, Basing Sea is ripe for these types of storylines. Added beers fraught with the arrow and who truly confront his past for the first time, and the Katara is the fights her own prejudice about the Fire Nation. Zoko redemption arc is not also the right track, as short Bean and the Lure bring a lot of spirit and humanity to the banished prince. His storyline stems like the one that the writers did not get wrong. The Last Airbender heading towards the meaningless season 3. It's daring to be negative about the series, but it is hard not to be the one that adapting some exact story but just its live action format and still chooses to make the confounding choice like the reducing the season into the 7 1 hour episode. There is a reason why the Nickelodeon did not that in the first place, and they should have to click by now. That is probably would not ever look just like a film did not. For what worth, season 2 is the relatively better as being its own series that the first time viewers of the story will enjoy. The performance are the delightful upgrade. The writing allows the character to show their personality rather than the explain it, and the banding action is creative and the breathtaking. What as take the season 2 final cards the credit, ones cannot help but the wonder how to story we meet are rewarding. And is season 3, it is not much so as beating the Fire Lord, but also the blossoming potential romance and the emotional punch of how Aang and his friend have coming in their journey. These characters spend a lot of time apart in the season 2, going off on their subplots and not much being done by the from friendship that can last more than one. The lifetime worst of all, Aang feels like a sporting character in his own story. Zoko and the Katara are pretty much the photogeneous at that point. There is a joke that the friendship was the journey all along, but that is truly that case with Aang. His ear-normed upbringing taught him to let to get of the worldly possessions and the personal and desires that defined a vision to keep his love for his friends and being the greatest water that ever was. All that the age of 12 on top of that did not his tragedy corrupt him. He chosen to take the humanity because his friendship grounded him. Not much of that the actually felt through Aang's story in the Netflix water. The Last Airbender is just on the afterthought in a misunderstood story. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 is now streaming on Netflix. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 review. If you know me, then you know I am a villain girl, so while I should be ashamed to admit how much I love the Fire Nation, I would actually scream it from the rooftops, seeing Azula and Zoko, who down to a very different path after their shared trauma, which we learn more about this season, just made me love them more. The mother in my wanted to reach through the screen and give them each hug, and while asking them to please make up with one another and just put their differences aside. We might not get to see a lot of them together, but when they do share the screen, they are both incredible, delivering career best performance that evoke every emotion under the sun. They are too young actor to watch that is show for. And speaking of them, mom is my wanting to hug these kids. The rest of the younger character are going through it is well, and there is lot of the drama and the discourse this season. The tension start off earlier but fully explored in the final a few episode, making it difficult for these fans to connect. I would not spoil too much, but there is lot of ups and downs that had me crossing my fingers and my would all work all right up until the massive changing the season 2 ends on. Have no fear though, and season 2 and 3 were filmed back to the back, and which means that we will get answers sooner rather than later. Season 3 is currently in the post production and should be coming in the early 2027. I for one can cannot wait to see what happens, although I am fairly certain of at least thing and will remain the vigilant to avoid the spoilers since I have not yet the watching the animated series. I cannot talk about the Water the Last Airbender season 2 without the discussing the fan favorite character of my daughter love her, so I was excited to get to meet her and she did not disappoint. What the Spitfire, I love that does not take anything from the anyone, not even the water. She puts the Aang in this place from the very first moment she meets him, setting the bar for a dynamic that I personal love. The visual image top tied with the incredible effect with the series that constantly showcases water, air, earth and the fire bending. You need to know that you are doing and something, and sometimes these abilities are used to solve a problem, sometimes they are used during massive fight, but every time they look the great. Avatar the Last Airbender season 2 is even better than the first. The explorer darker themes and the intense moments between not just reveal but friends. They are moments that are made my cry, ones that had me cheering and other that me genuinely terrified by these characters. I cannot wait for this how it end in season 3, and then I will be immediately hunting play on the episode 1 of the animated version. About the Water the Last Airbender season 2. Avatar the Last Airbender follows on the young water as they learn to master the four element water, earth, fire, air to restore balance to a world threatened by the terrifying Fire Nation into after a by-waste and the victory, saving the northern water and tribe from the inventing Fire Nation. Water on Katara and Sokka regroup and set off on a mission to convince the elusive Earth King to aid in their battle against the force of Fire Lord Ozai. Avatar the Last Airbender Season 2 Review. Jack of all element, master of none. I was probably kinder than most of the first season of Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender remark when it first released in 2024. While it definitely had its problems and even the best possible version of it could not hold a candle to the animated original, it was still a solid and action fantasy series in its own right, on the top of being the serviceable adaptation of the source material with plenty of room to improve in potential future season. Unfortunately, now that second season in here, it feels like it's taken one step forward and two the step back. What is Water the Last Airbender season 2 about? Following their battle at the Northern Water Tribe at the end of the first season, Water Aang played by the Guardian Cormier alongside the companion Katara and Sokka played by the Kiawentiio and its the land obviously and the respectively the journey to the Earth Kingdom and its capital city of Ba Sing Se in an effort to recruit the Earth King's assistance in the deafening fight. Lord Ozali played by the Daniel D. Cam and the gang's travel will see them meet new friends and confront old enemies. Toph Beifong, a young blind girl and the earth blending prodigy played by the Miyuko, joins the team as Aang, the earth bending teacher, and all over the violence team. Prince Zuko played by the Dallas Liu continues his search for the water while hiding out a fugitive with his uncle Iroh played by the Paul San Hong Lee. All the while, the dangerous Princess Azula played by the Elizabeth Yu and relentlessly pressures the water with gold and the calculated the manses. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 Review. Okay, let's start with the positive here. The action and the VFX are the absolutely incredible. The first season already nailed live action bending, but the increase the emphasis on the earth bending is the particular is really impressive here. The fight scenes are very dynamic with the tone of the moving part, but you can always tell who's doing what you home and how people are using their powers and the weight and the impact of each hit and the plus of sequences and Aang's glider and the creature effort of Appa and Momo look just good if not better than the first season. Moreover, the cast remains a major highlight. Guardian Cormier embodies and the Aang's pacifist spirit very well. Kiawentiio has a lot for more to work with at Katara this time the round, and Iron Oshili Sokka is actually allowed to be funny this time, plus is one of the changes to the source material that I actually quite Like Sokka has much more time to grieve and process his trauma over huge death compared to the original series, and overseas needs the emotional element just as well as the comedy. Additional stars Louis Oko and the Paul Sun Hong Lee are continued to the most unapologetical great things about this series. Every moment they have the on screen, especially when they are impressive screen presence, the shines a lot more here than in the first season. Now that we are in the part of the story Azula actually supposed to be in. As for the big question of the whether or not they are pulled off live action Toph, the answer is a railing yes. Toph is my favorite character in the original series, as this for many fans who get her right was always going to be circular for this time to work at all, and Miyoko take and the character is about as good as you can ask for. The snacks and the rebellious attitude, her incredible power on the battlefield, it is all here. And sadly some of my exploit tomato and the movements have been cut for time, but she still feels like a character that embodies that the spirit, but things cut for them bring too much biggest overarching problem with his season and the series as the whole. Book of Two of the Water, the Last Airbender animated series, has 20 half-hour episodes. By the contrast, season of 2, the live-action Water, the Last Airbender series, only has 7 one-hour episodes. Not only in this significantly fewer storytelling opportunities in the shorter amount of overall time, it is also the episode less than the first season, which was working with the material that had more that could be reasonably condensed or cut, and but there is needing to condense everything too much means that every major plot point in the book 2 and the modified one book for the 3 4 season all or happen in the incredible rapid session with no room to the breathe. The journey to B Singsa and the meeting of the first quarter of the book 2 happens in episode and a half. All the different storylines with the B Singsi and all of which constitute individually multiple Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 is a major improvement in almost every way review. Long ago, the world of the animation lived in harmony, then everything changed when the live action remarks attacked. They are all the rage and race with no Disney classic save from a live action, reimagining so much that other companies are getting on an action. DreamWorks found the tremendous and the success with the How to Train Your Dragon remark, a live action take on the Fun Gully is in development, and the Netflix, after completing striking out with the adaptation like Death Note and the Cowboy Bebop, hit on absolutely home run with the One Piece of all the live action adaptations in history. None of may be more displaced than Mr. Knight and the Shyamalan's The Last Airbender, which adapted one of the Nickelodeon's most acclaimed shows ever, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Despite the absolute misfire, the Last Airbender franchise is still going strong to this very day. The Avatar saga, expanded with the Legend of the Korra, is set to continue in the upcoming Seven Heavens and will even check in with Team Avatar as adult in the new movie The Legend of Aang and The Last Airbender later this year. Stuck in the middle of all that is the second crack at the live-action take on the IP, Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender, the first season of which largely fell into the good, not great consensus. While language and better than the Shyamalan's movie, the series condenses episode format and change to the source material caused some division. That did not stop the show from getting two seasons, Rainbow and the Thankful Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 is a closest improvement overall. What is Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 about? Season 2 of Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender largely adapts the second season of the animated series, titled Book 2. Earth picking up 2 years after Team Avatar's victory over the Fire Nation at the North Pole. Aang, Gordon, Cormier, Katara, and Kiawentiio and the Sokka are on the search for a new earthbending teacher for Aang, and it takes them in the unlikely direction of a young blind woman named Toph. And meanwhile, Prince Zuko and his uncle Aro are living in exile and following their obvious search for a water Aang. Eventually, their paths cross again, but not before the Zuko's sociopathy sister Azula arrives to rake and chores and hog throughout the Earth Kingdom, particularly in the elusive majesty of the Ba Sing Se. One of the biggest issues of season 1 was its overly expository dialogue that instead and explaining every every single inch of this world, even the parts that are not vital to the story being told. Not only in this redundant and the frustrating for the exciting fan of the IP, but it also a big turn for the newcomers who want to dive into this world for the very first time. Thankfully, this is one of the many places where season 2 improves up season 1. Not only do the dialogue and the storytelling feel much more natural, but the actors have a lot more chemistry with one another. Each of the characters also has a general arc in the season 2, with everyone earning at least one big moment to shine. Sokka is coping with the trauma of losing Yo, and Katara is looking for the closure now that the Aang's and the waterbending training is complete, and Zuko and Iroh are both forced to grapple with the whether redemption of their past mistakes is even possible. It's all great stuff and loves and more interesting than season 1's average retelling of the events. Many viewers have pointed out how much the cast members have aged in the 2 year gap and between seasons, but they may have been a blessing in disguise as these characters really do feel like they have grown and evolved. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 nails one of the original show's most beloved characters. Avatar The Last Airbender Wetner's character are improved upon the exponentially, which is great, but the big question on every fan's mind has to be and how the series will handle one of the original show's most beloved character, Toph, and those are what concerned need not worry as the Blind Bandit is easily one of the season 2 biggest highlights. Miyoko knows Toph blunt comedic timing app unique the perspective on the world, making her a more than faithful adaptation of a beloved character. Speaking of beloved character, the delightfully Vela Azula gets a lot more to do this time around after the perhaps being introduced a bit so early in season 1. Yu is clearly having a lot of the fun playing the character though compared the source material. The series could have developed deeper in the franchise's most psychologically complex antagonist Azula Choros Moy and the Teely and feel more like the two-bit hunch people instead of the complex figures they are in the animated series. Avatar The Last Airbender is a step forward narratively but thus stumbles on the visual, giving the character more time to breathe and grow, especially in one episode that's an almost direct adaptation of the legendary tales of Big Sing Se is easily where the Water The Last Airbender improved the most. Unfortunately, that forward momentum is sorely lacking in the visual side. The series has some well shot and the geographic action set pieces and some truly impressive CGI creation, but they are often marred by the disappointing drab and grey color palette. It's not an exaggeration to say a good 90% of the series take place only a cloudy, overcast day, and it makes for some very unappealing visual, and especially compared to show as vibrant and colorful as the original Avatar The Last Airbender. Azula's so role and the series' disappointing visual choices for a shame, but the pros significantly outweigh the cons this time around. It's an adaptation that is not only much more faithful to the original series, but also one that's willing to make some worthwhile changes to the streamline the story. Sure, there are some elements that the hardcore fans may take issues with, but on the whole, Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 is a worthwhile return to the Four Nations as the ambitious live-action remake gears up for its final chapter. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 Review. Related traits. Avatar The Last Airbender Toph, actor who contacts the complicated and blocked her vision on set. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 debuts June 25 on Netflix. The first season of Avatar The Last Airbender felt like watching the Amber Island player, but ironically it was a season of TV that struggled to decide whether it was gritty and dark for the now grown-up who watched the original 20 years ago, or if it is show replace the stillness and fun for a new generation of kids. It wound up struggling to mix the two tones. Thankful when the world needed him most, the Avatar returned. Season 2 of Avatar The Last Airbender improves on nearly every single aspect of the first season in really impressive ways. The pacing is much better, though not perfect. The condensation of the storyline makes for a matriarch story that allow each character to have their own satisfying arc, and there are some original spotlights. They are genuine improvement on the source material. The show also finally resolved its tone issues by Aang by the story, just like the original cartoon started maturing in the book 2 of its story. The live-action version also takes a more serious approach with its cast grow-up quality literally in the case of the God and Cormier and growth spot which the season tries clunkily to explain and the story growing up along with them. With book 2 being such a spare-rings chapter in the Aang and the saga, it made for a hard story to adapt as it covered too many locations and side stories. The live-action adaptation decided to pretty much jump straight on the B-Sang and the portion of the story as soon as possible, building up the thriller and the dangers of the metropolis. It works as we get a good feeling for the inner working of the Earth Kingdom capital and its culture, the sheltered life its citizens live, and the vast network of the Skari and the surveillance they live and under. The season finds a nice balance of the giving the main story a sense of urgency while the justifying showing and down to allow the character enough time to explore the city and have individual arc. Particularly compelling are the side story of Aang, who is forced to play the politician with long fronts to try and gain out audience with the king for Toph and her dealings with her horrid and family history, and for Zuko and Aaron's attempts to starting a new life. Mayu Kok and does a great job as a Toph, embodying the character toughness and the proverbs, but also her vulnerability, especially when it involves her family. Speaking of life, the family, the Five Nation continues to be a highlight of this adaptation. Elizabeth Yo's Azul is a phenomenal villain and gets an unexpected role this season that gives us in highlights in the resentment toward both Zuko and her parents and her desperate and the breathless pursuit of approval. Dallas Liu makes for impeccable Zuko, and his take on the Zuko along the storyline is a treat to which even in a new medium. This time, however, it is Paul Sun Hong Lee's Uncle Oren and who gets the absolute best part of the story. This shows now with the remake storylines and where to add the original ideas to make later element hit harder. Much like the open one piece live action adaptation, this show know when our remake storylines and where to add the original ideas to make their relative element his harder in the case of the Iroh. Season 2 expand on the Iroh's history with Earth Kingdom, not only with him losing his son, but in getting quite expect in the remaining as that before he was fun and wise uncle, he was a war criminal. The last airbender takes Iroh's takes and forces him to reckon, and with life he is destroyed and the Arturis committee under his command. It's working from the nouns and the implement and movement from the source material, presenting them in a way that the Nickelodeon could not allow. And sadly, it is not all perfect. Visual that show is a letdown, mostly set at night with poor lighting that make it hard to follow the action. Bending looks great, but there is some evidence with the CG and the action geography and the creator like the ones shared tank and look great. Worse yet is the constant use of the CG imagery and the visual setup for nearly every location. You can count on the one hand the number of the scenes set inside physical sets that are not just enclosed rooms. Likewise, even a lot of added material and rearranging of the original source elements make a good overall story. It does suffer by the forcing some of these elements into the perhaps the wrong places. It is most noticeable with the app's disappearance, this happiness, and early in the cartoon and becomes a driving force of most of the book too. But the live action show leaves it for the last couple episodes of the season, making it feel like an afterthought. It therefore loses most of its original impact and comes across as a force out of the blue twist with there are already enough subplots and driving the story at its conclusion. And this continued to be biggest issue with this adaptation. It fails to complete to include every single memorable bit from the original cartoon. Even by the time it included, it no longer makes the sense. Related it's everything coming to Netflix in June 2026. The verdict. Awaited the Last Airbender returns with a much improved season 2. They find a good balance between the lighter fun movement and a darker and more mature story. The pacing creates a sense of urgency that allows for side story, including an expanded role for Uncle Iroh that not just the highlight of the season but better than the source materials. Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 review still not the original, but Netflix proved it does not need to be. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 does not transact the original show and never will, but it remains well made, mostly well acted, and infectiously enjoyable to start with. I want to address this watching Netflix The Last Airbender to see everything different from the original show and decide whether these changes are good or bad. Personally, I don't want to review something by judging it for what it is not, and it getting budget now. The change from the original show, which always be one of my favorite of all time, I risk doing it, and therefore the original change from the original Nickelodeon animation that I will reference in this review are ones that help handle and impact the story at hand. Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. With that out of the way, Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender pick up after a time jump with Aang Katara and Sokka still fighting of the Fire Nation in the search of an airbending teacher for the water. Therefore, as was the case, Season 1 of Netflix show Season 2 adopt and most of the second season of the animated original. The trailer of Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender proved as much and indicated that the show would be very similar to what came in the first season. After watching all 7 episodes, I can confirm that this is pretty much the case. There are changes to the original show, primarily considering its timeline, but it has a lot of fidelity to combining this, the excellent production design, a cast that rankings from a just okay to great, and that dry spirit. Avatar: The Last Airbender on Netflix still works despite an annoying studio mandate the case something problem. Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender is still mostly brilliant and the produce what is undoubtedly the best quality of Netflix adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender at its production quality. Never once does this show in both season 1 and now into season 2 feel like a pond in the attempt and chasing in odd nostalgia. Every costume location set the scene and the big moment in crafted with the meticulous detail allowing the show to feel beyond epic in scope. The child-friendly nature of the original show meant this was not always the case, but Netflix adaptation consistently remains as that the budget of a streaming game is family on screen. Also, as a massive fan of the original show, I loved how accurate a lot of this production design was. Every location either looks identically or the holds notable Easter egg to these of the original show, as do the costumes of each character. Change might be made to the story and the timeline of the original story, but no one can say that the Last Airbender creator at Netflix did not try their harder to bring the look of the animated show to life. The same can be said in the action sequences. The way bending is brought to life is for the most part extremely exciting. Some of the movie include noticeable green screen or CGI effects that somewhat break the impression and what that was always going to be expected with the show that is adapting one as the creator as the original was. The only outright and bad production movement in this sense are there the Last Airbender character in the Aang or Zuko are the rendered in full CGI which simply looks too fake to suspend disbelief. Beyond that, though, each action sequences work the bending movie are beautifully performed and the choreographed with a lot of the fidelity to the OG show and the wit speed and the fluidity that was surely lacking in M. Night the Shyamalan's The Last Airbender adaptation from 2010. To put it bluntly, Netflix clearly went to a lot of effort to make the Avatar: The Last Airbender look, sound and feel huge in all areas means a few CGI hiccups the streaming service skated. Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 cast is still a mixed bag with a few key standouts. On the whole, the best term to use for Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 cast is as you were. There are not many improvements here, nor were there any the downgrades or the slip up regarding character depiction. My issue from season 1 remain, as do my personal standout, meaning season 2 would not exactly change anyone's mind to how Netflix cast adapt the original Last Airbender iconic character. I maintain my criticisms and this from season 1 that it is the writing, the Katara, the hinders, Kiawentiio and the performance not to the other and around we are given the fire and the emotion Katara has the throughout the original. Kiawentiio and does very well, but overall Netflix adaptation just does not give her a whole lot of that, making her performance feel very one note throughout. In a season, Gordon Cormier performance as the titular character in the same, although I feel the spirit of the Aang is the Cormier performance more than I do with the Kiawentiio and the Katara. Cormier acting in the critical anger and movement that happen in the water the Last Airbender season 2 can feel underbacked, and Cormier cannot quite find the right balance between fury, sadness, joy and the wisdom the encompasses Aang in the Last Airbender season 2 despite doing an otherwise solid job. Neither Cormier nor Kiawentiio is the outright and bad here by any stretch, but there were undersaved and by Netflix script. Had more time been decided to fleshing out their character, more emotional fiery movements sprinkled throughout season 2, and more time to perhaps to act with movement, this could have been different. I will say thought that the Cormier and the Kiawentiio have great chemistry when one screen together, which definitely helped the more mature relationship aspect of the show. Considering positive standout, it is no surprise that Dallas Liu and Paul Sun Hoing Lee remain the two strongest pillars of the Last Airbender cast. Again, this reinforces my point that is the Netflix script that the Hinter Aang and the Katara Zuko and Iroh are the best written character in the original show, and a vast majority of the material they are given in the Netflix The Last Airbender season 2 is the same. And nonetheless, Liu and Lee perform it with the ease, embodying the inner conflict both characters individually have and how that inform their relationship. Lee's performance means that the Iroh loses a bit of his wisdom from an original show, but it is that good in the emotional, hard-hitting moment that it does not matter. The same can be said for Liu, and who expertly portrays the war inside the Zuko. It helps that Liu is also the best performer of the banding geography on the main cast, making just about the everything Zuko does it Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender season 2 almost perfect. Elizabeth Yu also deserves a shout out, and here is Azul after the receiving a slew of horrible online the hated after season 1. You better duplicate and the more of the audience's respect for the Azulu. She is great as a foil to just about every character as line the word cater and the seeking power in the world, the Thalia train and Mumatama and Daniel Ki Kim is also a good alongside her despite not getting as much to as their animated counterparents as a season 1 roles gave them. Where new characters are concerned, the only standard here is a Miyuko as a Toph. Toph is a fan favorite of the original show for her brash, demure, strong bending, unwearying loyalty, and the beneath the surface insecurities in this sense. And the Toph, like Zuko, is the most difficult character to get right. Miyuko though nails it immediately more than any other. The character Toph feels like she is lifted from the animation and the place in live action thanks primarily to Miyuko. In light of the rates of the adaptation, such a fan favorite Miyuko rises to the rock solid challenge and the smashes past it, likely making even the bolder proud. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender season 2 suffered from the few episodes. Tied to my crispiness of the Katara, Aang and the character arc is my frustration and Netflix episode mandate for Avatar The Last Airbender season 2. The creator that show recently revealed that wrote 8 episodes as season 1 had, but Netflix forced them to cut with one favor of the tightening the focus on key themes for the season. In a cruel stroke of irony, this decision had an reverse effect that Netflix changed, resulting in some of Avatar The Last Airbender season 2 core themes feeling entirely rushed through. For intense, some of the biggest arcs that all tie together and require a big force, and the Aang's hesitance to use the water state of a going missing less repetition arc and the long fungi well. And I stated early that I would not judge Netflix show for what it did not have in the comparison to the original, and I will continue to do so. Still, Netflix The Last Airbender includes about the 50% of each of these arcs, meaning each one feels the short changing. If arcs from the original show are going to be introduced in the adaptation, they need to be set up and concluded in a way that feels the satisfying or includes a new element for a new medium and audience, as many Netflix shows already do. Otherwise, it is better not include them at all. Better yet, Netflix should not have the considered that was original planned as an 8-episode story into 7 With the extra 60 plus minutes each of these arc could have been depend further explored, and as a result felt much more satisfying in their conclusions. Netflix The Last Airbender will never be the original show, but maybe it does have to be. Again, I am not willing to judge Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 on how it compares to the original show, as it does not need to be it. What matters is me whether the former captures the spirit of the later, and whether any change made in the live action version are made with the narrative character and themes in mind for the most part. One, I can say that Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 does exactly that, only the aforementioned aspect of the original show in the barrier section of this review suffered. Everything else felt either faithfully adapted as a part of the new story or changed, altered, and the reference in the unique way how the original episode, The Tales of Ba Sing Se, for instance, for embedded into the wider show felt so well done here, especially through way stories like the Toph insecurities and the Sokka attempts at Potter. They were small side stories with no real narrative impact in the original, become genuine compelling developments in the Netflix version, and that proved that live action does not need to be a non for one of the original. The same can be said for the other change, but it won the tongs and the library you may impact on the Sokka Katara earlier transmission into the painted lady, the subsequent spiritual connection that brings to Zuko as a blue spirit, that the person's ties to the Zuko's mother or Azula relationship with her. Most of the change made for the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 feel like were made with a genuine good reason as to why. For that reason, Season 2 of the Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender still worked for me. It is infectious and enjoyable thanks to all of the great aspect it has, and despite a few mis setup here and there is something bad, some big and some small, it is doing something that a lot of the adaptation of Ironically and the beloved story struggle to do, standing on its 2 feet and a story worth telling, a new medium, nor floundering as a smallish cash grab. All episodes of Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 are now streaming on Netflix. Review Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2. The original animated series of Avatar The Last Airbender is considered one of the greatest fantasy television show ever created. This is not only because of its world building and action, but also because of the emotional depth hidden beneath its seemingly simple premise. The first season of the Netflix adaptation managed to attract a large audience, yet was also not what that fans expected. The more mature tone and a larger scale were appreciated, but it was something entirely different. Season 2 of Avatar The Last Airbender adapted source material from Book 2, the chapter of the original story that is considered to be the best, alongside Book 3. For the start of the second season, the stakes are the larger, the political themes are more complex, and the character began evolving in the ways that permanently change them. Every new city feels different, every culture has a different personality. The world feels more lived in the before. That immediately stands out in the confidence in season 1. Occasionally felt trapped between the horroring the source material and trying to reinvent into the original. Season 2 feels the more comfortable making creative choices. The writers are not longer appear to restructure event, combine storylines in a new way, or develop unseen character motivations when necessary. Most important, the heart of Avatar The Last Airbender remains intact. Beneath the visual effect, political intrigue, and the spectacular battles lies as a story about the growth, friendship, responsibility, and identity. These themes have always been the foundation of the franchise, and season 2 perceived them. That is far more important than recreating everything exactly as it appeared in the animated. The story in Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2. Season 2 picks up something and event of the first season, Aang and the Golden Cormier, Katara, Kiawentiio, and the Sokka, and continue their journey. They are the Earth Kingdom as the search of the Aang's airbending teacher. On the paper, this sounds like a relatively straightforward object. In reality, it becomes the spark of a flame that dramatically change the world and the future danger. One of the greatest strengths of the season is it expands the scope of the conflict. In the first season, and the Far Nation largely served as obvious enemy. The heroes know they are fighting, and why season 2 introduces a much more complicated reality. The Earth Kingdom itself is deeply flawed. Corruption exists at every level. Citizens are often manipulated through manufacture, and the fields suddenly and the fields far more realistic and more complicated. The crown jewel of the season is undoubtedly Be Sing Se. The legendary Earth Kingdom capital has always been of the most fantastic location in the water universe, and the live-action adaptation brings to life with the remarkable effectiveness. At first glance, the city appears to be magnificent. Massive walls surrounding a tribal civilization seems to that untouched by the war. Streets are crowded with the merchants, officials, and the ordinary citizens. Everything appears peaceful, yet the deeper the story ventures is the Be Sing Se, and the most unsettling it becomes. The story in the city gradually transforms into something resembling a political thriller. Secret hide beneath every conversation. Information is carefully controlled. Citizens are encouraged to ignore reality in the favor of the comforting illusion. The atmosphere becomes increasingly tense as the gang realize that some of the most dangerous theater that face are not soldiers carrying weapons that the system designs and to surpass truth itself. This season does an excellent job of the balancing this political storyline with the personal journey of its character. The plot never becomes so focused on world even that it forgets the individual at its center. Every major conflict serves a purpose in the development of the protagonists. These tensions create some of the season's strongest dramatic moments. Aang wants to everyone, but the world keeps reminding him that such goals are often impossible. At the same time, the season never released Lolo on the action. The most memorable scenes and frequently the quietest one conversation between the friends, moment of doubt and difficult choice frequently carry more emotional impact than the biggest action sequences. This balance between the character and spectacle has always been of a water greatest strength, and the adaptation largely preserved it. By the time the final episode arrived, the story has evolved into something larger than a simple quest to learn a bending style. It became a meditation on power, responsibility, leadership, the future, and the personal identity. Evolution of the character in the second season. If the story provides the foundation of season 2, the character provides its soul. Aang experienced some of the most meaningful growth in the entire series. During the first season, the often appeared overwhelmed by the expectation placed upon him. He was a child trying to survive a conflict. He never asked to be a part of season 2, being transformation into the something and capable of expecting their responsibilities. What makes Ajan's development to the real is that never abandons his core personality. He remains optimistic, compassionate, and hopeful. However, these qualities in increasing change by the harsh reality surrounding him. Every difficult decision forces him to confront the gap between who wants to be and the world needs to be become. Katara continued to be one of the series' most important characters, where she has always been a source of for emotional support for the group. Season 2 allows her become a leader in her own right. Her confidence grows with each challenge she overcomes. The writing for the series also does an excellent job of highlighting the Katara empathy without reducing her to a purely ignoring role. She is compassionate, but it is also the determined, intelligent, and the capable of the confronting difficult situation directly. Sokka received for some of the strongest material of his live-action portrayal so far. One of the recurring themes of the water has always been the value of the originally and the people in a world dominated by the extraordinary power. Sokka embodies that idea perfect. He cannot bend an element he does not possess mystically and abilities. He used intelligence creatively and courage repeatedly proved just and improvement as an bending technique. Introducing Toph was always going to be one of the greatest challenges facing the adaptation because she is arguably one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise. Fortunately, the live-action series largely scaled in that matter. From the moment she appears, they inject fresh and enduring energy into the story. She is stubborn, blunt, confident, and completely uninteresting and in meeting anyone else and the expectation youth beneath and the top extras lies a character struggling with her frustration and the limitation they show the wisely avoid treading her balance as a weakness that defines her. Instead, it becomes one of aspect of the most largely and more fascinating individual. Her relationship with the Aang between and one of the seasons highlight their personalities constantly clash. Aang perfect the flexibility and the obedience. Top believes the obstacle should be confronted and directly this difference and created both entering conflict and the meaningful lessons. Zuko once again steals many of the suns in the which appear. His character arc remains one of the greatest achievements in the modern fantasy storytelling, and the adaptation continues, retreading it with care that deserves. Season 2 finds Zuko at a crossroads and stripped of many of the goals that previously defined him. He being the questioning and everything he wants, the believing, and everything reflects the tension between Zuko was the race to be and who he might become. The conflict is invisible in his expression, decisions, and the relationships. The emotional center of the Zuko storyline remains Uncle Iroh, and their relationship continues to be one of the strongest elements of the series. Iroh provides guidance and offer wisdom without judgment, and the spot his new form to matter what their conversation are often simple of the surface, yet they are carry a tremendous emotional weight because they are the represent form of the unconditional, and the spot really is seen ever else in the story. Season of represent two major step forward. The Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender is more ambitious, more emotionally mature, and therefore more confident that he is the predecessor. It is not perfect, but while it does not replicate every aspect of the animated series, it demonstrates a growing understanding of what the truly matter about this world and its character. What ultimately makes the second season successful in its understanding of growth, every major character change in the meaningful ways. Every storyline contributes to a larger exploration of identity, responsibilities, and destiny. The world becomes the more alive, the conflict because complex, and the emotional stakes because become the significantly high. Perhaps the greatest compliment that I can give this season is that the leaves and the desperate wanting to see what comes next by the final scene. That stage is set for the conflict, and the conclusion of the story is season 3. The original animated series become the legendary because it balanced spectacle with the humanity, is the delivered breathing and action, ever losing sight of the people at the center of the conflict. Season 2 of Netflix adaptation comes closer than ever, the capturing the same balance. It may not be the perfect, but is engaged, emotionally consenting, visual impressive, and frequently amazing. More than anything else, it feels like the moment this live action avatar finally found its voices. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender hits a wall in season 2. For all its virtues, it always been pottery obvious that Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender would not save the world as the definitely as a Nickelodeon's and original series. Its first season had a lower bar to clear after the traverse that was Mr. Night Shyamalan's 2010 film. All it really had to prove was that the Avatar could in fact be adapted in live action at all. It passed that test with the relative ease and got a little extra credit from the cultural appreciation and casting and keen dedication to the source material. Fans' dodging desire for an adaptation that respected the original series was potent enough to paint over any flaws. As a water title hero moves from the relative and the relative, the cake walk of season 1 and into a more timeless chapter, though one has the wonder if we were to land on the show in the first place. Season 2 re-unties with the flattering avatar Aang after a generous evade the time jump. One sporting character mentioned that has been a long time since the event of season 1, but the much was clear from the Cormier absorbed growth spot. It is the first of many changes to the original cartoon that Netflix Avatar deploys the season, but the only one of the show control. One cannot stop a 12-year-old kid from the maturing into a teen, though the subsexual it may work in the water for and Aang in the throes of the property and the lands of the more literally sense of the ants in the true darker chapter. The other directions water takes that time around us hardest to forget, but more on that later. With the adaptation of the showrunner, a bird comes arrive to of the new procedure at the home, and it seems a new perspective on adaptation. The source material season was the hellbent on the returning as much from the OG Avatar as humanly possible, beat for beat and bar for bar. But season 2 does not want much of anything to do its the predecessor. It's not note the wizard and time to throw out the playbook. Playbook 2 is the most circular chapter in the Aang journey to become the water. It was in the generation warrior with the ability to bend the four natural element and the stealthily and the best season of the original series. Sure, the action has heavy climax will eventually see adaptation in season 3 might stick the most freshly in the fans' minds, but Aang implicant and the fight with the fire and Lord Ozia, the direction intent on the global domination means nothing without all the title challenge and focus on the road to the Fire Nation. Most of these speed bumps manifest and during his time in the Earth Kingdom, one of the four sovereign nations with this alternate fantasy world. The return of the Seasosn comic which appears once every country and amplifies the strength of the firebenders tenfold pairs Aang or the race and the race against time to achieve his destiny. But this adventure in the season 2 have less to with the mastering are the next element on hit to the list and much more with his emotional and spiritual well-being. Avatar 10 tore Aang's sense of self, the rebirth in that the drained and near deep afraid is he is manipulated by one would monitor after the next brief loosely his strongest connection to the ear-normed heritage and the struggles rooted with his relationship to the water state, a kind of the power up that concept on the cumulative knowledge and the strength of his past life. Avatar 2 is the eager to put the Aang and through the Winger 2 and the Dotto for his sporting cast, but is almost searching for ways to update the tale where none need apply. Jabbar Razint and the Christian Berlin Avatar newly Christian showrunner clearly want to make the water their own, but without an understanding of why the original worked so well. Season 2 crashes into a wall of its own making. It Avatar season 2 and got away with the remakes and reworking of the certain plot points that second totally abuses the privilege, and not only does it wrinkle and handful of a plot and heavy episodes into the whole long Among Us, but it scrambles the order of events entirely. That season sees on companion Katara. Can't you become the painted lady of the secret identity that was originally introduced in book 3? Sound like a small thing is complain and about the same the goes for the event of this season opening episode in which Aang, Katara and her brother Sokka launch a shell truck across the techniques and the region called the Serpent's Pass. With this event were not just that for the sake of one did the original water, they were dominious falling in each character respective journey even without a crystal clear knowledge of the beats of the book. To our story here feels aware and the overwrought, and we cannot accept the sense that the new water has removed load-bearing element of the Aang arc and replaced them with the big TV facsimiles. This is not to say they are not a glamour of old show or a barring that accompanying new story in the season 2 as our heroes goes through the motions of the annexed with the water state. Cormier remains as all while remakes and wonderful Aang. He raised above the clunky dialogue to the fine emotional core in the Aang's newfound struggle and the plays perfectly against the Miyoko, a welcome addition, and Aang's earth-bending teacher, the blind Billy Lynch, Toph Beyond it. One word the thing remained unchanged between the cartoon and live action. Its tough ability to propel this story into the straight forth, and the Miyoko clicks effortless in the imbalance and the suffer to the least from the series need to novelty. Still, it is not quite enough to save the season once the gang reaches the Earth Kingdom, capital of the Ba Sing Sea, where a city-wide conspiracy wait to test the foundation of their friendship. Avatar Blancas under the weight of its blood. Season 2 is cloaked up with the dark vision of that show should be the slavishly faithful adaptation and radically remaining of the cartoon and set with the love walking talking manifestation of the original many members. It is the antagonist that remain water best featured in the season 2 sometime to the series determined chain has been great work as long fog as a being saying top the bureaucrat and making the most out of the matry role, even it does not highlight on frustration positive and the better also beef up the sympathy for the five nations roles family king of a quieter more calculated side of the Aussie whether the series needed not did for the Elizabeth Yu steps in the spotlight as the Princess Azula. She is another character dangerous in the pursuit of the non-whatever pollution, and the season has the searches to have every time she revisits her plan to her brother Sokka or the hints towards the psychological power play she faces in court. There is not weaker performance in the bunch, but sad for the Liu and the Paul's son Hong Lee, who is once again in the amazing form as a Ryu, and the angle of the Zuko shoulder so much if it feels like excess budging. Planetary seems to happening in the better season 2. People are certainly leaping heading into the battle and making ambitious plans, but every time the best settle or the board reset, who are not closer to understanding the who those characters are not what they are truly want. If many cases they are literally spelling it out for it waste for cause that always been game to tell this story right off for this reasons, but as low as it is a crime for and a new path, but a veteran to commit at the already and the before launching into the next phase. Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender Season 2 skirts by refusing to be a perfect copy of the cartoon. Netflix live-action Avatar The Last Airbender has returned for Season 2 and right off the gate it feels like a completely different show. Released as start 7-episode drop book 2, Earth is no longer interested in perfectly making the 2005 animated masterpiece, but instead the shift into a festive text font and the fantasy built on the beloved character moment. The first season of the live-action adaptation struggled under the weight of the translation. It tried to hit the same comedic weight of the Saturday morning cartoon while simultaneously showing Fire Nation soldiers bringing people alive, creating a sense of the tone with splash and did not stick for most viewers. And season 2 solved this dilemma by allowing the subject matter, writing and theme to grow up both literally and the metaphorical. And the most obvious castles for his shift is the water Aang actor Gordon Cormier, who looks the noticeable older given by much time passed between the filming schedules rather than masking it with the camera trick. And the showrunner Christmas Biol and the jobber Rationates use the physical reality of their cast to enhance and shows darker tone. Gordon is the Aang you want to, but he is always also the flesh and the blood of person growing up before your eyes. Boylan and the recently said in interview with Netflix Tamchi hammered home the production's philosophy in adaptation the story of a live action medium. You are a 15 years old, you are an airbender, your entire society has been lost. The grounded approach completely reconcilies and the show's main character, the animated Aang, was a compact and the hyperactive 12-year-old who can make his survivor guilt with a goofy expression, pen wings, sledding and high-pitched laugh. But live action Aang looks and the sounds like a young teenager suffocating under the reality of a genocide. And we see the change application with the Aang finally reaches the Earth Kingdom capital of Ba Sing Se in the original animation. Aang entry into the city is defined by the goofy low stakes joyride on the transition system in the live action version, that innocence in the shutter during his first interrogation with the dial and Lee secret police contravened by Long Fuji, the Grand Secretary of the Boxing Lay and the leader of the dial. Lee Aang does not get to be a carefree kid. Instead, he is treated as a dangerous political pawn. Cormier plays the scene with a quiet, rigid anxiety, perfect, capturing the experience of the teenager who realizes the people who are supposed to be his allies are just as terrifying as the army hunting him. This twist on the source material strips away some of the original comedic charm, but it is gives the series an emotional gravity that actually justifies its extent. The maturing blades directed into the show's most iconic location within the walled Earth Kingdom city. Ba Sing Se introduced in the cartoon with a mix of the Wismi and the Ivory High concept, brainwashing with the entire episode, decided to building a new zoo and the taking tram right before there is no war in Ba Sing tragedy fully set in. Since the live-action version compresses a sprawling 20-episode journey into the 7-hour-long blocks, the whimsical elements are replaced with a city that feels like a claustrophic surveillance state. Rajini and the violent double down by the weaponization of the bureaucracy by the stripping out in the epic failure on the original and transforming Ba Sing Se in the setting of a political thriller that mirrors in the visual language of the historical dramas like Rome 2005 or The Emperor Short 1996. Now we are in this tonal poet more effective than the Uncle Arrow and the in both versions Arrow and the Zoki, entire Ba Sing Se and the roughest to lie low. The animated show family C uses for the slow burn beautifully animated tales of the Ba Sing Se, where are watched Arrow and quietly more in his own lead train. It was the masterpiece of the epic storytelling. Rezani and the Biolan cannot replicate that quiet passing, so there's something bordered by the forcing. Arrow is attractive for confront his legacy. The live action series expanding significant that putting Arrow face to face the Earth Kingdom refuge the very same people who is the home biggest as far as the nation's top journal. It takes the cartoon tragic and backstory and turns into the uncomfortable Rick knocking where a jolly tea-loving old man Faiz have come to love despite his heritage. It was to look at the conflicts, the cost of the own power and the crime that the choice give La the incredible dramatic material and make his redemption arc feel even more earned. Does the show lose some of its iconic humor in the process of the becoming darker, more political and the oftentimes evil the horror? Yes, absolutely. The dialogue and the occasionally feel stiff and the visual constraints of the streaming television mean the lighting is often too dim to capture the vibrant color palette and the animated world. And the season 2 is the noticeable improvement when it comes to the VFX work, from the elemental bending to large scale battle like the water spirit in the episode 1. But the minimal screen time given to the favorite creature like the Appa and the Momo was not the well with the long time viewers, but by refusing to a few less one on the photocopy. Netflix series has a final found its footing by the drawing out some of the best part of the cartoon in its growing up way. By treating the horror better, the Last Airbender, where the Seasosn see the disappoints and the civilian state of the 100-year war, the precise and the event of the show with the dramatic weight they demanded. Netflix adaptation proves it does not need to be exactly like the cartoon to be great. Much like Aang, same, it just needs the courage for its own path. Awaited the Last Airbender Season 2 review. Netflix Pale Imitation TV review. In Avatar The Last Airbender, the acclaimed animated adventure series then ran for 3 seasons from 2005 to 2008 on the Nickelodeon. One of the most memorable killing scenes came in the brave young Aang crossed over into the spirit world into meet the terrifying being Koi the face stealer, a menacing, marvelously designed and the movement triggers the ghost bodies like an enormous centipede. Its face can suddenly distort in the visage of the anyone, including those you love deeply. That improving is a play to manipulate these who encounter him into the showing even just a hint of the emotion, as if you sleep up, your face will be coming the next is still. Avatar The Last Airbender, the live action Netflix reimagining, now entering in the second season, is the embodiment of the Koi in television form. It steals the faces of the animators' strays, impersonating them in an attempt to manipulate you into the feeling some of the emotion you did upon the first beholding them. However, once you begin to look and closer, you cannot unsee and how this is show the merely and the impersonation. It is one that, like the Koi, may trick you in brief moment, but only because it recalls something you already have an emotional connection with. Even with the story about a child and a friend who must save your world from a fascinated power, hellbent and the destroying them, the remained relevant, resonant, and why it surely make made, and there is never it justified through the show's narrative bonds remains strong. The face as a boy bears it only all the more garish because of its familiar yet empty it remains. This season centered on the Aang, Gordon, Cormier, Katara, and the Sokka journeying to the Earth Kingdom after the battling alongside the Northward Water Tribe, where the Fire Nation outcast Zoko and the Arrow hideout. Unfortunately, it sped through some of the best bite in the original series without the slowing down the appreciate what made them work. The key moment of the development for the character as the deal with those pain and the eventually self-discovery as the rearranging in the voice the pro of increasingly sacred obligatory box checking rather than the true board storytelling. Much of this is likely due to the show only having 7 episodes to cover what the animated series did at 20, but that it is not a cause of you horrendous. The dialogue can be even that the original show was written for children. It never talked down or held their hands through the more complicated ideas in the grappled with. In this live action take at get the many painful status and the scene of character explaining these we have just witness or laying out. This is are the already clear if you are just watching. This is unfortunately the Netflix special, as the field designed for the people only half paying attention, while the punishing these who are following it closely. Where the original show was the playful and the poetic and even quite we found this one the strains to recapture that the same spark even when it comes close to doing so, like when a familiar bit of the original score rises up or a line or the dialogue is uncurrent with the reverence, and you cannot shake the feeling that you are just feeling emotion that the show has not remotely come close to earning. Put another way, that the fans will understand this adaptation has more in the common with the production, but on the and the Amber Island pair in the original series final season, that harmlessly terrible play which attempt to chronicle the hero's journey as they watch in the audience proved revealing a funhouse mirror image of that they had accomplished. Only this adaptation is not darkly silly and is mostly just sad. The only silver lining to it all that is may get revered and both new and old return to the original series instead of stealing through this pale imitation, because even this effectively memes and the past on the season skidded at role in the stealing your time, and yet more faces of it trick you with in the future. Awaited The Last Airbender Season 2 TV review. Aang's epic journey continues with a story that favors emotion over action. Plot: Team Avatar has to be Singsa, the capital of the Earth Kingdom, to find the Aang and earthbending teacher and make a startling revolution in the process that could turn in the tables in the ongoing war against the Fire Nation. Review: It's been 2 long years since Netflix live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender made me feel like I was walking on air thanks to the effort to recreate the original animated series. While some critics nitpicked the first season, I basked in the way I brought one of my favorite animated series to life. Thankfully to feeling the remains, even the second season of the water favored drama and the emotion above action and intrigue. I joked with my wife as I watched the second season of The Last Airbender, saying it's the two tower of the series, meaning it's the middle story that the capitalizes on the first and the movie pieces into the place for the grand final. In many ways that accurate, but it also a half of right. When I say the season favor emotion over action, I mean that. However, these words should not date you. The Last Airbender has always been talked about the character first and foremost, and the new season does it outstanding job of what make Aang, Katara and the Sokka relationship special, while also adding new character mistress and the state to mix till the hero is not the only one doing some emotional heavy lifting this season, as character like the Uncle Auro and Prince Zuko and the Toph Beifong and the Mio offering some most of the rewarding and the introspective moment. In short, the sophomore season of Avatar: The Last Airbender finds the team Avatar traveling to Ba Sing Sea, the sparring impenetrable capital of the Earth Kingdom, while searching for the Aang would-be earthbending teacher. While exploring the area, Aang, Katara and the Sokka meet the Toph and the blind sociality with all that happens to be the greatest airbender that would has ever known. After convincing Toph to join the party, the group along with the several others unravels the mysteries of the sacred weapon that can help them destroy to fight the kingdom once and for them. Before we get to the heart of his new season with the covering action from the series, we find it though it's more spread out. The showing tends to the favor big CGI driven skimpish over the peer-peering small battle throughout the 7 episode run, letting the first and the last episode to do the heavy lifting. You are type of the person you cannot handle being in one place for the majority of the season. This part of the Avatar story might not be your favorite. I think Avatar and it's the best when it's focused on its character, their emotional journey and their transformation from the inexperienced chosen one of the gifted warriors with the fate of the world on their shoulders. Aang does a fair amount of the growing up this season, as the procedure of being the water informs his every move. Add to these emotions in the burgeoning love for the Katara, and you have got a more mature performance from the Guardian Cormier that show how much he has grown between the season. Iron actually bring more depth. Sokka, who is still processing the loss of the prince. You Amber, and last season he wants to move on, that does not know and how which make his new connection with the Soki and difficult to grasp. Try as a might, Sokka is the feel and fall for the most walling of his heart for keeping it from the breaking and use memory alive. Depth is not exactly what you come to Sokka for. It the obviously does a fine job bringing inner Cormier to bend and less memorable of the team Avatar. While Cormier and Oshler are fun to watch, the its character like Katara, Uncle Iroh, Prince, Zuko, and Toph that shine throughout the season. I love the Kiawentiio portrayal of the Katara. She offers and the acting hypnotic and the graceful. She is the heart of the team Avatar and the Kiawentiio and the bring Nanian and the depth to his character and while navigating the world that is one of the bring and being burned to such and her on-screen chemistry with the Cormier and Liu in outstanding, making her someone to watch her and the career involves. Other character that deliver an emotional get punch on Uncle Arrow and the prince who they continue to explore the debate of their families bond and the outcast of the Fire Nation being on the run and given the zero Zuko perspective and Uncle Arrow's brushes with the death, both his own and the victim of the Fire Nation's destruction, add lures to the door that feel the earned and the genuinely emotion. They are my favorite pair to watch this season, as I love the push and the pull of the Zuko allegiance and the Arrow's re-rocking and his past transgressions. And meanwhile, there is Mia Cash as Toph Beifong and welcome adaptation to Team Avatar, who is the snacker permission inside and the social standing, being the daughter of the exceedingly wealthy family, bring a unique perspective to the water world. When the Netflix cast Cash as Toph, fans revelated saying she is told for the past, I have never had a problem with it and the Cash is the perfect choice to play my favorite character from the animators. She embodies everything I love about the spacey earthbender and the every aspect like the here animated counterpart and honest. I don't know if they had the purpose. She had the sound uncanny by the measures. She married version when she speaks. It's wild in addition to look and the feeling like the top her story delivers some of the season best dramas as she search for her own identity while the shielding her family name and the reputation, while the Cash is order and Toph would be the her character while animated series accurate. It hardly matter as she displays all the qualities that make Toph such as a fun and the engaged character. That's why that's important. Finally, I would be remiss not to mention the Elizabeth Zoe performance as the Zul Prince Zuko, sympathetic sister and the daughter of Fire, the Lord Ozai, and Azula is the unhanding in the season with her desire to please her father, inspiring her to do the unspeakable things. Zu plays Azula with the conviction and with her the companion Tila and Mona Tama and the Mai